your host, Carolyn Solo, LCSW, EMDR therapist, and mom of 3 daughters. Thank you for joining me.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 121 of the Future Template Parent Podcast. I am your host, Dr. Carolyn Solo, PhD, LICSW, EMDR consultant, intensive therapist, mom of 3 daughters, coach for intensive therapists. And today I want to talk about getting stuck in EMDR and how fears of getting stuck with a client can keep us from going all in with intensives. This is an issue that comes up with coaching clients and consultees really frequently. I thought I'd talk a little bit about what I do when I get stuck and when I feel stuck, and why I think that intensives can be a great antidote to getting stuck and to the fear of getting stuck. So I think something all of us EMDR therapists do fear is getting stuck with a client, right? Seeing a client loop, seemingly circle endlessly around a target with no movement. The distress isn't going down, the SUD stays the same, maybe even goes up, or maybe they say, I'm not noticing anything, I'm not feeling anything, there's no body sensation. We can start to panic. We can start to think, what if EMDR doesn't actually work, right? What if I'm just bad at it? That big fear. Maybe it does work, but I'm bad at it. And then I think a lot of us fear, what if I keep pushing and I harm this client, right? And these fears are really big and they're real and they're consuming, and they can, impede us from doing the work we can do. And we care so deeply about doing good work, right? And about helping our clients who are hurting to find relief. And that's what we've told them EMDR will do. We don't want that imposter syndrome to creep in, and it can, because that can be disabling. I talked about that a couple of weeks ago. And I think that when we're having a hard time or feeling stuck, we can, if we let those thoughts creep in, it can kind of get us even more disconnected from the process, more in our heads, less trusting of the process, which is going to negatively impact our clients, honestly. When we become less attuned, when we start to detach from the immediate experience with the client, then we're not doing our best work. I mean, we all have those moments where that happens, but I do think that when we're getting in our heads about, is this working? Is this not working? It's kind of can be a self-fulfilling prophecy if we get stuck there. As I've shared many times, I was a huge EMDR skeptic when I first started basic training. And I think that skepticism was a protective part of me that formed, a long time ago, way before I became a therapist. I remember feeling it a lot as a teacher as well, but my first career. But I think that part, that sort of skepticism that like anything can help clients, got stronger during my therapist training and early career years. And it sort of morphed into this fear that I wasn't going to be good at this, that I couldn't be a good therapist, that I wouldn't actually help anyone, that I didn't deserve to hold that lofty title of therapist. I mean, when I first went to grad school, I was 30, and I'd been in therapy off and on for, 10 years at that point. And so and even more consistently, probably starting around age 26 or 27. And that title of therapist felt really important to me. Like that was a really big, important role to take on. And so it felt scary for me that I was assuming that title. I was saying, I'm going to be a therapist. I am a therapist, right? And I think in some ways EMDR training just upped the ante. I decided to get trained in EMDR for one, because I was feeling burned out. I was fearing that, whatever I was doing wasn't actually helping people. Nobody was really healing. I think part of that too was that I was in a community mental health agency where the way the system was set up, it was really hard to provide quality care to clients. That was, of course, not my fault, but I didn't really have that level of awareness at the time that, seeing 60 clients, having a 60 to 80 client caseload and, all the things that go along with those kinds of settings was actually not sustainable. It felt like I was supposed to be able to do it. If the job existed, that must mean it was doable. I know that now is not true, but I think when I was 30, I felt that way. So I heard about EMDR, and this was after I left community mental health and I was in private practice, but I really wanted that promise to be true. But then what if it wasn't? And I was bringing that fear into basic training. And even worse than maybe, what if it wasn't, the promise wasn't true and it was because of me, right? That I was bad at it. It wasn't that EMDR didn't work, it's that I didn't know how to do it well. And so I think in some ways EMDR intensives can activate that fear even more, right? Like if I'm bad at EMDR, if I can't get people unstuck, right? Oh my God, what am I going to do if they have them in my office for 15 hours over 3 days? And geez, how badly will I be able to screw them up during that time? Oh my gosh, they'll never recover. And I honestly think that there is some fear mongering during basic training. It's well-intentioned, right? Saying like, go slow, do a lot of prep, make sure not to, screen for dissociation, all that stuff. I think all of that is intended to protect clients and therapists, but I sometimes think it has this effect of making new EMDR therapists terrified of ever going into phase 4. And so guess what? It's never going to work if you never go there. But like, even if we do, can be very tentative and not like really follow the protocol because we get scared. And then we're actually not doing a EMDR in the way that it was designed. Right. So yeah, I think that an intensive can activate that fear even more because like I'm there for a long time. What if, right? But I do want to quote, so one of my group members for this current group of the EMDR intensive 12-week intensive that's currently going on, will finish at the beginning of December. She was talking about her basic training, and she did it at the Center for Excellence in EMDR, which is like one of the original EMDR training institutes. Her trainer was Dini Laliotis, who some of you probably know. She's one of like the EMDR OGs. She worked really closely with Francine Shapiro. Her name is in Francine Shapiro's like EMDR book. So yeah, she really obviously knows her stuff and is very, very skilled. And so this group member of mine was in basic training with her, with Dini Laliotis. And during a Q&A, this group member asked, what if I screw up my client? Basically, that was essentially her question. And Dini said, and I love this answer, like, no offense, but like, don't give yourself that much credit that you have that much power. I love that answer so much, right? Because our clients who are suffering have been living with this suffering. That's why they're coming to us. So if we're taking appropriate precautions and doing adequate preparation, and let me tell you, that doesn't mean 5 years. There are some clients, like clients who are very, very, very dissociative and with extreme trauma histories. Yes, they probably need the preparation phase to be very long. And you'll find out quite quickly with someone like that, if you go too fast, that like, it's just not going to work. So you will back up and you will, but I don't think we should start from the place of assuming that's most people. It's not. People have been living with these effects of trauma for maybe even their whole lives. So you pushing a little bit is not going to be the thing that completely unravels them. And I know you all care deeply about being good therapists. So you're doing all the things that we do to provide a caring, attuned, safe space. And also things are going to happen sometimes that are a result of the dynamic. They're a result of what the client brings in that we're not going to be able to anticipate or control. And it's all about how do you show up in those moments. It's not about avoiding those moments. And another sort of plug for intensives, if you have one of those really difficult moments with a client, whether they dissociate or they get upset or they're like upset at you for, how fast things are going or how hard they are, you can work through that. You can move through that with them, and you have the luxury of time there to do that repair. And honest genuine, compassionate repair is such a beautiful part of the therapeutic process. I had to do this with a client of mine not that long ago, where I had to cancel a session really, really last minute because, as I've talked about a lot, life with children. And this client got really upset and was upset about it because she was looking forward to the session. She blocked out all the time for it. And, I had to just be humble and say, I'm so sorry. And I understand how frustrating that is. And, we were able to reschedule for the following day. And it wasn't ideal for her. But we, immediately at the beginning of the session, we had a long time because it was an intensive day, but we spent some time processing that first, just talking about it, and we worked through it. And then, we've been moving along successfully with the intensive since. But yeah, we're human, right? And one, we're going to get stuck with people because they're human and we're human. And two, we're going to make mistakes because they're human and we're human. It's about what we do in those moments that actually matters. It's not about trying to avoid them entirely, because that's not being real and that's not being you. And a huge part of being a therapist is just being ourselves, really being ourselves, not being a version of ourselves that clients can see is, disconnected and artificial. That's not the therapist. I'm not a blank slate. I'm not going to pretend to be a blank slate. I think it's impossible to be a blank slate. We're all doing our best to show up as, the best versions of ourselves. And sometimes that best version of ourselves is kind of messy on a given day. So, and that's part of why therapy is a real relationship. So some thoughts about why we're afraid of getting stuck, at least from my perspective. But so what do we actually do? What do I do when I'm feeling stuck, when I'm feeling like distress isn't going down, or a client is saying, I don't feel anything, or we've been doing the same target for a long time and it feels like there's no movement, like nothing's changing. Okay, let me give you a few thoughts. And also, I'm sure all you have a lot of great ideas. I would love to have you share those with me too, over email or on Instagram or whatever. I'd love to hear other people's ideas, but here's just a few things that I tend to try. The first thing I'm always going to tell anyone, any consultee, anyone I'm talking to, is if they're feeling stuck before they do anything, if they notice that stuck fear coming up, first, try to stay grounded. Take a few breaths yourself, attune to the client, really try to connect with their body, use those mirror neurons, what are they experiencing? One of the ways that I find I can stay grounded is with beverages. I always have a really hot beverage with me and a really cold one. So ice water and then tea or coffee or something. And I find that sipping those can help me stay grounded. It's sort of a strong sensory experience that helps me. And I also just on the topic of grounding, what I do to try to stay grounded during sets when my client is, processing is take a couple of notes, on what comes up, what I'm noticing, something I might want to ask next or whatever. That helps me stay connected to the process and attuned. And I have a folder for each client where I keep my handwritten notes in. I know other people have other more sophisticated techie ways of keeping their notes, but that's how I do it. So just that, stay grounded, stay attuned, and then let it go for 3 more sets. Don't add any interweaves. Don't change BLS. Don't ask them if everything is okay. Just try for 3 more sets. If you're stuck and they seem increasingly upset and you need to take a break, that's one thing. But if they're saying nothing's moving, I don't notice anything, I would go for 3 more sets and try to normalize that experience for yourself and for them. Because if they start to think, oh, nothing's happening, that's going to get them out of the process as well. So try to go for 3 more sets, as neutrally as you possibly can, if that makes sense. So, you're cultivating patience for yourself. And a good reminder too, when we're talking about getting stuck, any movement is movement. Okay. We're not trying to get every target to a 0 in 3 sets. Wouldn't that be amazing? Right? And impossible. Any movement is movement. Even if something doesn't feel positive, it's still moving, right? For example, getting from an 8 from a 10 SUD to an 8 over 2 or 3 sessions of a really, really difficult target. Obviously, it's really difficult if they're at a 10. Without extreme distress and decompensation from them is actually huge. Okay, that is movement. You're not stuck. If you're accessing affect with them, you are doing the work. You're not just talking about the pain, you're moving through it, which we know is what needs to happen. And while you're doing that with them, you're attuning, you're containing, you're making them feel seen while they move through it. So if they're having affect, that's not bad, that's good. Okay, so getting comfortable with affect is huge too. And I see this a lot with newer EMDR therapists, is this fear of like ever making our clients feel any kind of negative emotion. Well, that's going to happen. That's supposed to happen, right? A lot of our clients have been engaging in a ton of avoidance and dissociation from this painful experience. And that's not working, which is why they are here with us, right? You know, talking about the pain, which they may have done in talk therapy, probably hasn't gotten them where they want to be. So we need them to be with it, right? Like I said, in a contained, attuned way within a safe therapeutic frame. And every client's pace, of course, is going to look different, which is so important to be mindful of when you're thinking about getting stuck, right? Their developmental history, their earlier traumas, their experience with therapy, their experience with EMDR, all that stuff matters. You know, use the workbook, especially with an intensive. Lean on that history taking. Let that inform you. Maybe you need to do some more parts work. Maybe you, maybe there's some like an experience that's kind of blocking some of what you're trying to work on right now, and that needs to be addressed. Something else that's important is if they're having a lot of somatic reactions, but you feel like you're not getting much else, that's huge too. That's huge. Remember, somatic distress is one of the biggest causes of distress for people, right? Like if we're having a somatic reaction, that's pretty intense. That's an amazing thing to engage with. If they're having a somatic reaction to what you're processing, that's super, super important, right? And remember, somatic reactions are parts, right? So lean into that a little bit. What does the part want you to know? Does this feel familiar, this sensation? Do you remember feeling this at other times? Can this part, you know, make a little bit of space? Can you do a visualization where that part is giving them a little space? Can they get curious about that part, right? Try to access a little self energy from an IFS perspective. All of that could create some movement. I think something else that's important too is to hold space for them and for you if things aren't going the way that you expect. Just acknowledging the hard work you're both doing, whether you acknowledge that explicitly to them or just through honoring the space that you're sharing. I don't think that like doing this work, as long as you're bringing the appropriate compassion and care and attunement and safety, which I think you all are, because that's why you have these questions. You're worried that you're not doing that enough. So I know you are doing that. And there's going to be something that comes from that. It's not going to set them back. I really like, maybe if you prematurely ended treatment, if you planned an intensive with them and then did 1 hour and we're like, that's it. I mean, maybe then you haven't moved through things enough to have some real significant movement and a sense of progress, but that's unlikely that any of you would do that. And that's actually also one of the reasons that I really love the 3-day, because I find after day 1, people can often feel a little bit worse because we really kicked things up. And then often they'll come back on day 2 and have some dreams to share or some increased symptoms. That's all really good. That's parts getting activated. That's, it's like you're using like the Tice's log, right? That's all really shows that you're doing the right work, I think. Day 2, you start to see some progress. Often people will come back on day 3 and note that they're feeling a little bit better. And then day 3, really, you make really, you can get to a place that feels like a stopping place that makes sense and feels somewhat, if not complete, at least like it makes sense to end there. And that feels really good. And the luxury of time for all of this, right? That's allowing for more movement. If you're not worried about a client being stuck and then going home after 50 minutes, that does allow you to feel more connected to them they of course will sense that in you, that you're sort of open and expansive and ready for the journey to just take its own course. That's, the presence of you creates an environment in which their nervous system can heal, right? So when you give them all that time and there's no sense of being rushed, that is incredibly productive. So just reminding you again about how intensives can just be this avenue for getting unstuck in so many beautiful ways. Certainly using the conference table, which is something I talk about extensively in other episodes. I will link in the show notes the dissociation episodes that I recorded a while ago, where I talk more about how to use the conference table as both an interweave, as a preparation approach. I can't think of the right word, but that using whatever version of kind of creating a workspace for parts that you use, I use the conference table, is incredibly valuable to use when you're getting stuck. Sort of like, what are the parts? Let's invite in all the parts that have something to say about the target that we're processing. What do they want to share? How do they feel towards you? How do they feel towards me, the therapist? How do they feel towards this process? How do they feel towards each other? Use all the fleshing out questions we use in any parts work approach, and see where the movement is there. You might find another target. A part might share another experience that is getting in the way of processing this, might share why they're not feeling safe to process it, all those things. And you can return to the conference table over and over again if you feel like you're getting stuck again, and it's a new experience every time. When you're doing parts work, when you're doing the conference table, sometimes you'll feel or see or hear a shift. A part might say something positive or neutral. You can add BLS there to strengthen that. Maybe you need to create individual safe spaces for different parts. Maybe a part really can't be present for processing a certain memory and needs to go into their safe, playful, comfortable place. A lot of different parts work approaches, different modalities have ways for creating those safe spaces for different parts. These are things that I teach in my coaching, is the ways that I do this. Other things you could try to kind of shift out of, if you feel like someone's a real intellectualizer and you're really kind of stuck in the talky, use some sand tray. Try drawing. It doesn't have to be representational. It can be scribbles. Play even. Are there do they want to act something out? Do they want to, if you have a dollhouse, do they want to set things up in a dollhouse to show how things are? Do they want to create a safe space for a younger part of them to play? There's so many things you could do. You can experiment. You can use sound. You can use music, whether it's for creating safety or to soothe a part that is feeling activated. You could use some yoga or movement to help things move through their bodies, dance, screaming, running, whatever. And again, this is why I love intensives, because you have the time and space to invest in creativity, and you don't have to feel so bound by standard protocol, because, when you only have 50 minutes, it seems kind of like, okay, I just thought about sand tray, but I don't have time to get all that together. If you think of using sand at the end of one intensive day, you can bring it out for the next time they're there. Or you can even just say hey, let's pause for a few minutes while I just pull this stuff together. You're not running the clock down like you would be in a 50, 45-minute session. I love using magnetiles. I think when you let people get build things, that can feel really, there are ways to create again, safe places, or just representations of things that can feel hard to put into words. And I'm sure you guys have a million other ideas that are coming to mind as I talk about these things. Molding clay, kinetic sand. There's so many ways to bring creativity into your EMDR work when you have the luxury of time. And that creativity, everyone's needs are different. Everyone responds to different things. That's what's going to help create movement. And get you out of that stuck feeling. And also remember that you're going to be harder on yourself than your client is on you. It's more likely that you're thinking, oh, we're not getting anywhere. They must be so disappointed. And they must be so frustrated. I'm so bad at this. This is not helping them at all. Like, if it's really that serious, you'll know. But I promise you, you're being harder on yourself. And it's really okay to ask for feedback from them if you're not sure about how the session is going. You should ask for feedback. Don't be afraid. That's only going to help you. You can ask, so what have we've been doing today? What's been working well? What's been felt harder? How are you feeling about this target we're working on? And, just like, you can check in like that. Just going to really inform you. You're not a mind reader. So you might need to ask for feedback from your client when you are feeling like, I don't know where to go from here. You are an expert in EMDR, but they are an expert in themselves and their history. So bringing those two sets of expertise together is going to get the best outcomes. So just a few thoughts on what to do when you're stuck with a client, an EMDR client, and some reflections on why those fears about stuckness come up and how intensives can really help with fears of getting stuck and fears of that fear of oh, should I really go there? Should I really make them do that painful work? I hope some of these ideas were a little bit, inspired something in you. And on that, I'd really love to hear from you. I'd love to know, as with my community, what do you do when you feel stuck? How do you know you feel stuck? What do you think is going on? And what are some of the go-to tools, skills, interweaves, complementary approaches do you rely on? Anyone who wants to come on the podcast and talk about any of that, I would really love that. So if that's you and you feel like you have some ideas to share that, I know what I do myself, but there's so much out there in the world of EMDR that I don't know. I would love to have some of you come on the podcast and share your expertise and experience. So send me a DM at Future Template Parent. If you have some insights, send me an email. I'm always looking for ways to provide content that's, useful and of service to this community. So getting feedback is a great way for me to know what you guys are interested in. So I hope you all have a wonderful week. Happy Halloween. It's about to be Halloween here. And I'll talk to you soon. Take good care. Bye.